Welcome back. Our next session is titled Global Perspectives on P&O. We have 3 speakers within this session who will each be given a short presentation and hopefully answering a few questions at the end of each. We'll see how we go for time. So our first speaker has come straight from the careers panel, and that is Professor Cathy Holloway. Would you like to bring your mic and your video in for us, Cathy, please?
Oh, hello, can you see me, hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't quite see you yet.
No, I'm clicking start video. Oh, hang on, start my video. Okay, it should be working. How are we going? Are we all right?
I can see you now. Lovely to have you back.
Thank you, Jen. Lovely to have you back. I'm going to do something revolutionary and not have slides for my 20-minute talk. So I am just going to talk through 3 to 4 points around my global perspectives, and not share our standard GDI Hub deck, which I think you've all seen a million times. So I am Cathy Holloway. I am the academic director and a professor of interaction design and innovation at the Global Disability Innovation Hub and also at University College London, the Interaction Centre. And so I want to start my journey with, imagine it's the 2016 and we're about to go to Rio, to the Paralympics. And just before we go to Rio, to the Paralympics, we are starting the Global Disability Innovation Hub. And some of you might have heard of GDI Hub now, but back then, nobody had heard of us. It was just an idea. And it was an idea that was formulated in a Cafe Neuro and then on a bus in London between myself, Victoria Austin, and Ian McKinnon. And the 3 of us shared perspectives of, within the UK predominantly, how we had been working at intersections of disability inclusion and how we were feeling very frustrated about that. So I had been working at the interface between biomechanics and transport engineering. Vicky Austin had been leading the Paralympic Legacy Programme, and she had been looking at the interface between sport and what sport can do and large events can do for social change, as well as trying to deliver the Legacy Programme, which was across things like 250,000 opportunities for sports in East London, developing the Olympic Park so it's accessible, and building new schools, homes, redeveloping the area. So her background was in social development of cities, of space. And Ian McKinnon had delivered all of the work with the Built Environment Excess Panel, which were a group of disabled people that were trained in how to do the built environment, like read plans and understand the planning process. And they had a veto right over anything that was going to be built on the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, and he had delivered the standards for that park. And so we were each just complaining about how difficult it is. I was getting frustrated that I'd go to a biomechanics conference like IEEE, EMBC, and talk to people, and they would say, oh, just why can't people fix the environment? And you talk to transport engineers, and they'd say, well, why can't the NHS just give out better wheelchairs? And that was just within the UK, and Vicky and Ian had their own perspective. So we launched the GDI Hub because we realised something had changed in London. Now, there's arguments about whether the Paralympics was absolutely amazing, but at the time, there was a sense that it shifted attitudes. And we thought, what if we managed to build on that success and we managed to bring people, no matter where they were working, on disability, to the people that were moving to the Olympic Park, could we get them to come together? So we did that. And we got £10,000 from UCL, from one of these like internal, it was a big internal pot at the time. Normally it's about £2,000, it was £10,000. And we got that matched by the Mayor's Office through the London Legacy Development Corporation. We said we'd bring everybody together, anybody that was moving to the Olympic Park, and we would see if they wanted to work together on disability. I was just an academic. I just started, I was a lecturer. I didn't know anything about how universities work. I certainly didn't know anything about how UCL East was happening and this whole new campus was being built. I didn't understand the politics between institutions. And I didn't really understand how the government was giving UCL a loan, for example. I didn't understand any of that. But I did think if we all came together, we'd do something better. So we brought everyone together and everyone agreed this is a great idea, let's do it. So we launched it on Rio. There was National Paralympic down the park, and we launched it in London. The mayor at the time, Steek, launched it. And then I was flown by the International Paralympic Committee to Rio to give a talk on academic legacy of the Paralympics. Now, I knew as much about academic legacy of the Paralympics, if I'm honest, as I do maybe about, I don't know, nanomaterials. I really didn't know an awful lot about that. So all I could really talk about was our vision for GDI Hub. And we didn't really we were still emerging as a vision. We were a startup. We were like a spin into a university. And so we emerged from those conversations in Rio with a much wider sense of what was possible. And one of my main memories of our time in Rio was the fact that I arrived after Vicky had been there. And this was like, it was the equivalent of walking into an academic lecture theatre for Vicky. Vicky just knew the Paralympics. She thought it was perfectly normal that she would just have a lanyard where she could go into any event. I thought this was like absolutely amazing. And so we get there and she's sick of this Olympic bubble. She's been in it for a week, and she says, well, why don't we go to one of the favelas, and there's this great social development piece of work that's happening for people who live in favelas or informal settlement slums to play football. Let's go out there and see if they've managed to get to see the Paralympics. What do they know about the Paralympics? And let's see how we can begin to maybe work with them. And so we went out there and we had to meet at the edge of the favela, get out of the taxi, and then they sent motorbikes to pick us up. And so this 17-year-old boy, from what I could tell, it felt like a 12-year-old boy, was driving this motorcycle. I had to go back off. And at some point he said, you've got to hold on really tightly, which felt a bit uncomfortable for me. But he said, no, you've got to hold on really tightly. And the next thing I knew, we'd gone off the road and we were going down a flight of stairs, zigzagging in and out of this favela. And he's saying, it's because there's gunshot over there. We can't go over there. We're going this way. So I'm like, okay. So we arrive at this place and we watch people, and there was one young man who had no limb. He had been jumping off the trains, because that's what you do for fun if you live in the favela, and he'd got caught under a train and he'd lost his left leg. And he was a brilliant footballer with one leg and crutches. He was a brilliant footballer. And so from there we came back and we worked with them, and we worked with some other people from Rio to think about what globally could we do. And we were offered the opportunity to do AT 2030 when the Global Disability Summit happened. And for those of you who don't know, Global Disability Summit is a summit which allows governments and other big institutions to come and set global priorities. And it's a bit of a big deal. There's always a bit of I didn't know at the time, but it is a big deal. There's a lot of work behind the scenes to try and get flagship projects brought together so they can be big announcements. And then there's funding behind those big announcements that will last for 3 or 4 years. And during that time, was the build up to the Global Disability Summit, the UK government put out a terms of reference to say, would you, I think it was £20,000 piece of consultancy on assistive technology. And we applied to do the piece of work, and we got given the piece of work. And so we did the equivalent of £20,000 worth of work, which we never, apparently there's an ongoing joke within FCDO because they kept wondering when we were going to claim it, but we hadn't set up a bank account for GDI Hub yet. We hadn't had time, so we couldn't claim the money. We were just doing the work. And Vicky and Ian couldn't get paid anyway, and I couldn't get paid. So it didn't really matter to us. We just wanted to do the work. So we did the work, and we said, look, if you really look at assistive technology across the world, what would be possible? So with the £20,000 that we didn't spend, we went to try and talk to lots of people. So I spoke to Lawrence Kenny, who you'll hear from in a minute. I went around the UK and thought about, okay, this is what's happening in the UK. What works well for assistive technology in the UK? What doesn't work well for assistive technology in the UK? But we also then went to the major UN organisations. So we took one day and we flew to Geneva and we met with the International Labour Organization, the WHO, the ICRC, and we spoke to UNICEF in New York virtually. And we tried to understand what are they doing well, and what's working well. And then we spoke to people like Motivation and Humanity and Inclusion and others that were doing great work, Leonard Cheshire Disability, that were doing work globally. And then we flew to Uganda and to Kenya, and we did a scoping study. And again, there's people like Alex and Cicely and others that would know a lot more about maybe what's happening on the ground, but we weren't focused on one particular assistive technology. So it wasn't like we just wanted to fix prosthetics and orthotics, or we just wanted to fix hearing aids. We wanted to look at this as a system. So the actual product, as we all know from the WHO's 5 Ps, is only one of the Ps. And so even if we had all the products and the products were perfect, we still can't get them to people. So we were really looking to see where the gaps were, and was there what really needed to be done. So we crowded in a lot of people at the Clinton Health Access Initiative, tried to get them interested in assistive technology. They'd never heard of it. tried to understand. I had to understand what market shaping really was, and how market shaping and bringing down unit costs of devices for a country or for a large procurer could really change things, whilst also looking at what's broken within the innovation ecosystem and thinking about how do we change that. And so we built the initial 80-20-30 project based on our learnings. And our learnings, I suppose, for what was the role of GDI Hub, if you actually look at the finances of 80-20-30, very little of them come to GDI Hub relatively. But what we are is like a cog. We're like the meso layer. So we know that there's loads of people on the ground doing great work, and we're never going to be on the ground doing work, delivering prosthetic devices, for example. So what we want to do, and then there's great stuff at UN level. We've got the UN Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disability. We've got the European Accessibility Act. We've got loads of great bits of legislation, but there's this sort of bit in the middle that maybe doesn't work so well. Like, how do we really unlock procurement? How do we really make sure that we've got enough personnel? And so we felt like a lot of our job was around these partnerships, providing technical expertise where it was needed. So if we needed assistive technology expertise, how to do that. If we needed, like when ISPO came to us and talked about digital manufacturing systems, like what could we do in that area, thinking, okay, how do we pull in the experts globally that would know about this? How do we convene some sort of conversation around this? How do we then share that and consult with the public, but also with the experts globally and how to do that? So throughout the 80-20-30 process, we started with £10 million, and it's now £40 million. And that seems like a lot of money. And sometimes we get challenged. I get a lot of challenges, a lot of conflict where people come to me and think that, well, it's great that you're doing that, but why aren't you funding this particular project over here as if I'm a funder? I'm not a funder. GDI Hub's not a funder. We are a not-for-profit organisation that bids for grants, gets given grants, and then delivers what we said in the grants, and then provides the evidence back and tries to learn from that. And so I would say that throughout the global perspectives, my biggest concern about assistive technology, and it's not in prosthetics and orthotics specifically, but across assistive technology, my biggest concern is just how fragmented individual groups get. So if you're trying to have a conversation to get assistive technology generally inserted into universal healthcare policy, it's not helpful if one fraction of assistive technology, let's say eyeglasses, has an argument between themselves about what should go into that document. And so I feel like the market's already very fragmented. It's already very difficult to get people to invest in it at a very high level. And so we need to make sure that we work together to have our, those difficult conversations, let's say about digital manufacturing systems and P&O services, that we have those conversations in an open and transparent way, and are able to put forward a consensus as a group that we're happy with, and that even if there's some, we're not 100% sure, but this is our best guess at where we'd like to go. And the second part that I think is important is the personnel and the trust with the personnel. I think that everybody, doesn't matter if you're a clinician or somebody who's a dustman, you can be scared that the next generation of technology might take away some of your expertise or some of your skill sets or replace you. Nobody wants to feel like they're replaceable. So I feel that we need to understand when we're developing and designing technology and systems, where and how we maximize the genius and the caring and the skill sets of humans, and therefore where we maximize automation or production within technology, always keeping in mind two things really. One is the individual patient, making sure that they and their family and carers get the best life. And secondly, that as a society, we're using resources in the most fair way. So we're giving maximum benefit to as many people as possible. And the third thing I would just touch on is attitudes. And globally, the attitudes to disability and then the attitudes to assistive technology are obviously very different. Sometimes, countries can be coming out of civil war, have a very high instance, say, for example, of limb loss, and that as the country rebuilds itself, they can actually almost have a stronger sense of making sure that people who lost limbs are compensated and have what they need. And in other instances, it's the opposite. People are seen as people who don't deserve things. And I think that goes across the board. No matter where you go, people with disabilities or disabled people are constantly having to demonstrate their worth, and that's often because we are in a neoliberal world which values worth as production and how we give money back to society. And I think that's a wider discussion of why that's probably a bad idea. But within the assistive technology world, when you're trying to innovate those attitudes and behaviors, if people believe that disabled people are poor, which they normally are, but that they're poor because there's something wrong with them, as opposed to they're poor because they've not been given the life opportunities to be able to earn a living and therefore have disposable income, that changes the mindset of like whether or not people will want to innovate in that space. And so what you'll find is that people will innovate in the space where they believe people can buy things, which tends to be at the high end robotics, high end prosthetics, and maybe not at the lower end. So I feel like we need to tackle those three issues if we're going to move forward globally. And of course, there are many more, and I'm absolutely sure that Alex and Lars and Cicely will be able to pull in some very specific examples. But I'll stop there for some questions. Happy to take any, and hope that without slides, you've managed to keep attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for talking through the start of the GDI Hub and what you're up to currently. Really incredible work. So what's next for the GDI Hub? Where are you going? Quite a big question.
Can I say sleep? Would sleep be allowed? I'd love a week off.
Yeah.
What's next? To be honest, I think what's next is partly to hand over some of the work of 80-20-30 to at scale. We're 80-20-30 is about testing what works. There's been some stuff that we've done with at scale, which is the Global Partnership on Assistive Technology, where, for example, we've helped to develop the product narratives, which were delivered by the Clinton Health Access Initiative, and GDI Hub provided the technical expertise into those. And they're showing like what these, what the systematic problems are for market shaping. Once that works, and we've also tested doing country capacity assessments with the WHO, doing the VATA with the WHO, so the rapid assessment of assistive technology need for the World Report, and getting the and doing the country capacity fund, which was countries being able to bid for a bit of money to strengthen systems within countries. We do that work, we provide evidence on that work, not just GDI Hub, but for example, Maynooth University, Loughborough University, UCL, the General Partnership of 80-20-30 provides evidence on that. Once the evidence proven for systematic intervention, I believe that should then be funded by donors, by governments through that scale to scale. And then that leaves, I think, some of the work around the enabling environment, the built environment, how we develop the next generation of actual products, both for developing healthcare and the actual assistive products themselves, and how we do more on inclusive education and on climate resilience. So increasingly we're seeing, and Loss, I'm sure will comment on the environment and sustainability, but I think that poverty and disability are interlinked, they cause one another, and so therefore, and most countries that will be disproportionately affected by climate change are poor countries. So therefore, disability and poverty and assistive technology all come hand in hand. So how we begin to develop local production systems which are more sustainable, use more sustainable materials is very important to us. And yeah, I think for us now, we're just thinking about how do we consolidate our innovation activities so that we're easier to work with. At the moment, we get maybe 100 requests, and we're not yet as systematic as we'd like to be about getting back to people and letting people know how they can engage with us. And then starting to develop our own pipeline of technologies. We've got a couple of PhD student products that we'd like to get to market. And then broadening the inclusive design work will go into we'll have 6 global case studies that will go into global guidelines for the built environment, and then sorting out data for the World Report. So we're the collaborating centre for the WHO on assistive technology, and we just need to help them develop their databases so that we get information to everybody as easily as possible. So it's not just in some grey literature somewhere. But genuinely, the very next steps is a 3-week holiday over Christmas when my phone's off, and I binge on some Netflix. So if anyone's got a good series that you think's worth watching, I'm up for knowing what that is.
Well, there is my area of expertise, so I'll message you shortly. I've had a question come in from Ben, and it says, in terms of changing attitudes, this must be very difficult as it involves a cultural shift. How do you try to achieve this?
So I think attitudes change when people know people. I mean, it's very rarely, I mean, you can meet racist people and yet their best friend might be from a different ethnicity, but they somehow don't think of that person when they talk about an ethnic group, right? So I think that it comes with building relationships and talking about difficult subjects. So we've done that through 80-20-30 in a number of ways. Sport, I think, is a great, it almost sets up new tribes, if you know what I mean, but it can break down other tribes. So I'm sure, for example, you could be a Manchester United fan and hate City, but maybe you'd hate Liverpool more, for example, right? So it sets up new rivalries, but it can break down and it can change social attitudes. So we use sport. We've worked with the IPC. We made sure that, I forget how many countries now, I think it was 28 countries in Africa got broadcasted for free the Paralympics for the first time on terrestrial television. We have also worked in Kenya to run a campaign through a magazine called Shuzaz, which is a magazine that's written in Kiswahili and a sort of slang language, which is 70% of Kenyan youth read the magazine. And so all we did in that was insert characters in storylines who had a disability. There wasn't a campaign on disability, you know, it wasn't like, oh, here's the disability bit of the magazine. It was just, you know, here's a person who happens to be blind and here's a person who happens to be a wheelchair user, just as characters. And during that time, we did focus groups and things on people's attitudes towards disability, asking them questions like, you know, if your clinician was disabled, or there, of course, we use the language persons with disability, but if you're, you know, if your carer was, you know, would you marry somebody with a disability? How would you feel if your child had a disability? And then ran the campaign and then tested this afterwards to see if we'd shifted attitudes, and you could see a shift in attitudes. So I think there's something about normalizing things. So it's not just like Paralympians as well, you know, like sometimes can be a bit much, but trying to use different methods. But I think on an individual level, I've always found when I've tried to change attitudes, doesn't matter what it was about, but it's normally about listening to somebody, making sure they're heard, whatever they're, you know, even if you really disagree with them, they feel heard, and that you almost just plant a seed of a question. So I often find saying, rather than challenging someone directly, saying something like, do you really think that's right? You know, I just find that really difficult to believe, is almost better at helping to begin to shift something than saying, well, let me tell you why you're wrong. Because the minute you tell somebody, you know, they're wrong, their defenses get up, and they become more attached to a belief, even if they didn't really believe it in the first place, right? They become more attached to it. So I think it's more about letting people feel heard and you know, saying, fine, that's a good opinion, but I find I don't. Just try and convince me a bit more, and they almost unconvince themselves as they go if you listen for long enough.
That's really very interesting. Thank you very much. Just for myself, how on earth do you manage so many stakeholders with the GDI Hub? How did you develop that skill set? Because you have fingers in so many pies, all different people that you work with, so many different projects. How did you cultivate that kind of skill set and that network?
So there's two levels to that. I think there's the personal level, how do I manage it, and there's how does GDI Hub manage it, if that makes sense. On a personal level, I've, you know, someone like Loss knows me for a long time. When we set up GDI Hub, I think, in all honesty, I was going through a divorce and I was homeless, so it wasn't like the most personally resilient. I was feeling quite vulnerable, actually, as a person. I didn't quite know where I was going with my life, and as a personal level, I lent a lot on Vicky and Ian, if I'm really honest. Like, Vicky had a bit of a vision, and I thought, actually, I can add to that. And what I've noticed is that between Vicky, myself, and Ian, is that you could almost chart the course of when one of us has stepped up. You know, at the very beginning, I think it was Vicky, and then there was a bit where we were interacting with UCL more, and it was me. And then there was a bit where actually we needed to put the processes in place behind it. How do we actually get this grant? Like, how do, you know, operationalizing £10 million, we have to write like 27 to get bank account, HR, legal. And then Ian just stepped up, and behind the scenes, he just wrote things. Like, I have no idea how he did it, but he just, like, all of a sudden we had 27 documents. And so each time one of us, and we were able to say that to each other, like one of us said, I'm overwhelmed, I need to step back. Like Vicky stepped back for 2 months to write her PhD. She stepped back. So myself and Ian have stepped up, and then she'll come back, and one of us will probably step down. So I think personally, having the three of us has worked very well. We've developed a lot of trust between each other, and we lean on each other a lot. And we've had different skill sets. So I'm very good at managing the academic world. I think I am. You can tell me if I'm not. Lance can tell me if I'm not. Vicky understood politics, like local government politics and local stakeholders, in a way that I really didn't understand. And Ian is very good at the city level, getting all the people together at a city and working with the local disabled people's groups and having those local conversations. He's really excellent. So we each had very different communication skill sets, and I think we've shared those. We've all had to just learn how to deal with the UN. I mean, that's just a different beast. Like and I've just gone in honestly and said things like, I don't know how this works, like the collaborating centre. When we were starting that process, I was like, how do we do this? I don't know. And go and talk to a few other people. And I find if you go and ask people who are also collaborating centres, like, I'd like to know how to be a good collaborating centre. Generally, people want to tell you. So you go and ask that. And then behind the scenes, once we got big, really big, it was hard. Like there was a certain scaling bit where we were like, God, what are we doing? And everything was on spreadsheets. Like a typical startup, it's all just the three of us, and all of a sudden we had staff and partners and contracts. And then we brought in Joel, who behind the scenes has just been amazing. So Joel is just this brilliant machine, or human, who just makes processes work. He just makes processes work. And I love him, because he just like, if we need a process, there is a process. Somebody comes, things just get turned around. And so how we report is now, everything is sort of streamlined and is a process. So yeah, and mostly one of the biggest tricks actually has been trying to figure out how to manage between the community interest company and all the academic partners. Academia's a slow beast. It took us 9 months to get the contract signed for 80/20/30 at UCL. Lawrence and I are still trying to get a contract signed for our next grant on Tidal. And so trying to operationalize without internal staff, you're always playing catch up then to people like the UN, who've then hired staff and they're 9 months ahead of you, or you're just doing the job of the researcher and the academic at the same time, so it can be quite challenging. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I think it's time for us to move on to the next speaker, but honestly, I can't thank you enough for your contribution.
No, pleasure. Thank you for having me. And the next speaker will be awesome.